Well, as you can tell from that footage that you just saw, we've had some big floods here in Montreal, and it's affected people in terrible ways. A lot of homes, hundreds of homes, are partially, almost totally at times, underwater. Cars completely submerged, and people under incredible amounts of stress, not sleeping, having a tough time eating, all kinds of things. It's just really a disaster. So as a photographer, I was wondering, how am I going to photograph all of this? How do I want to approach it? Well, I decided, and it was totally a personal thing, that I did not want to approach homes and the people there. There are so many news crews out there. There's so many news reports. I didn't want to add to all of that, and I didn't want to add to confusion. A lot of people are there, a lot of volunteers. The Army is even there, lots of police. So I didn't feel like adding to that burden, and certainly I didn't really feel like photographing people in distress. That's just not what I do. I will leave that to those who are documentary photographers or who are working in the media. So the question was, what am I going to do? And I decided I do want to record some of the flood. So I went out during the day and I went to a couple of different spots, one around the lake shore, one on a very, very flooded main thoroughfare here. And I did some photography there. And it turned out to be quite good. And it's something I think I'm going to share with you in the future, because there are some really good tips I can pass along for that kind of photography. But it ended up being kind of documentary, and I didn't really want that. So I went out again at night. And you know something? At night, everything always changes, and this was no exception. I'm not going to say that it's artistic, but it certainly isn't as documentary. You get a different feel, and it's something that I was looking for. I wanted to present the flood in a different way. You see lots of photos taken during the day, not very many at night, so you get a different look at it. But when you're doing that at night, and when you're doing it around water like that, you have to have some best practices, and you have to follow certain things in order to get the results that you're looking for. So that's what we're going to be covering today on Neighborhood Photographer, the Montreal Flood at night. So 5 tips to get us going to make sure that you can get the most out of your night photography. 1, you have to have a tripod, because even if you have a lens with image stabilization, that kind of thing, and even if you pump your ISO way up, you're going to have trouble getting really clear, crisp images if you don't have a tripod. So make sure you bring your tripod along for this. You don't want blurry images. Also, a cable release or a self-timer or an app on your phone that reads your camera via Wi-Fi to trip the shutter. You don't want to touch the camera. You just want to be away from that situation. So cable release, self-timer, or an app on your phone to trip the shutter for you. A good range of focal lengths is good for your lenses too. So a good zoom lens would be good. Now I was using a 24 to 105 millimeter. I was using a 16 to 24, and I was also using a 70 to 200 just to give me a good length, because sometimes you can't access things, and I'm going to show you that in a moment and what you can do when you can't access, but you want as much variety as you can possibly have. Also, not only for sunshine, use a lens hood, because a lens hood is good here for 2 different reasons. 1, there are lots of street lights, and they can cause glare on the front of your lens, and also periodically there was a little bit of rain falling, and lens hoods tend to help keep some of that moisture off of your the front element of your lens. And finally, waterproof boots. Make sure that your feet are dry. All right? So those are 5 tips to get you started in this kind of condition, or if it's raining a little bit, things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a flood situation. We're talking mostly about night photography here. So this is looking down the main thoroughfare one way. This is, believe it or not, the good end, even though all of these parking lots over here are completely flooded. You have a little bit of, you can see some of the street here a little bit. It's not a total flood, but I'm going to show you the reverse direction where it goes on for probably a good mile, where it just is a river. Now the sun is going down, and it's getting a little bit darker, but I wanted to show this gentleman here who was in the middle of the, he's a city worker in the middle of the street. He was testing to see how deep the water had gotten at that particular area. But I'm showing you this because if you are taking a picture and you are planning to publish it, you notice his face is blurred there? I blurred it. If you want to show someone's face publicly, you either have to have a model release form and have them sign it, in other words, get the permission, or just blur their face out in post-production. If it's just for you, doesn't matter, of course. Looking down the other way a little bit, this person got caught in the water and they had to abandon their vehicle. Now I'm showing you this because the actual shot was this here, and that was taken with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens at 200 millimeters. And I wasn't as close as I really wanted to be, but that's the best I could do with that lens. So the reason why I'm showing this is don't be afraid to crop in post-production. I just cropped it, okay? Making sure to keep the light here. I wanted that in the image. And then you get a little bit of a better sense of what's going on with that car in the water. All right, now let's get down to some real night photography. This, of course, in the daytime looks completely different. And I was there in the day and I took images, but they ended up being more documentary. This is almost a little surreal looking, if you know what I mean. And there are some best practices to follow and some things to look out for when you're doing this type of photography. First of all, I was using my 24 to 105 millimeter lens for this shot at 24 millimeters, all right? This was a 30-second exposure with an aperture of f/22. The ISO was set to 100. Okay, so it's the lowest ISO I could go. I wanted to get a long exposure because I wanted the water to kind of smooth out a little bit. Now you say, what do you mean smooth out a little bit? Well, there was a little bit of a breeze that night, and there had been some heavy trucks from the city that had gone through, so the water was a little disturbed. I wanted it to be a little bit more reflective and give it a little more time. I was not, through any of this, was I getting 60-second exposures and stuff like that, because there were a lot of lights. All of these street lamps are causing a lot more light. If I'd wanted to go longer, I would have had to put a neutral density filter over my lens. So f/22, f/16 or f/22 is going to give you an effect. These stars, these lights look like stars because the aperture is very small. So if you like that star-like effect, f/16 or f/22 is your answer. This was at f/22, but I was also using f/22 because I wanted maximum depth of field, right? I wanted all of the sidewalk here to be crisp. I wanted everything in the back to be crisp. And by the way, I focused 1/3 into the image, 1/3 into the image. Now I have a tutorial on exactly how to do that, and I think the card should be going up right about now so that you can click on that if you want to see that a little later on. Focus 1/3 into the image. Everything is very, very sharp. So you have the star effect at f/22. You're looking for reflections. You have a lot of that. It's that night photography. And look at this, the sidewalk star. All right? You see that? The sidewalk star. That's this lamp, street lamp, reflected there. So it's a lot of things to look for at night. All of those things can make your image just a little more interesting. But look at all the stars. Look, even the street lights down there. Kind of surreal. A little bit different. I've moved down a little bit more, and the water's been a little bit disturbed, but I've shot this at 24 millimeters for 5 seconds at f/16 ISO 100. And the tip here, get down low. I'm not worried about reflections so much here. I'm just trying to get low, so I've got the tripod very low, and look at the water. It feels so much closer to you. Again, a completely different feel. And you can see there's still some light in the sky. Over here, now I'm showing you this for a couple of reasons. One, I'm looking at the truck over here, and his engine's running, and I'm thinking, he might get going at some point pretty soon, so I'm going to keep my eye on that, and you'll see why in a moment. But I'm also looking at this because a gentleman here is standing in the water, all right? Now, this was shot at 45 millimeters for 13 seconds at f/16 ISO 100. So what's happening, of course, is for 13 seconds, he was standing pretty still, but he was moving just a little bit. So you've got this ghost-like apparition. That's what it looks like, kind of like a ghosting thing. And I wanted that. That was, I thought, kind of, added to the surreal effect of this whole flood. So 13 seconds. And I was lucky because he wasn't moving around too much. I didn't want him to be, I wanted him to move, but not too much, because if he had moved a lot, let's say he had walked right out of the image, you wouldn't have seen him. But he was sort of just standing in one spot and moving just a little. So that kind of worked for that. Now, back to the truck. I figure he might start moving any moment. His engine's running. So lo and behold, he started backing up. And I moved to around over here, just at the edge of the grass here. And I brought my lens to maximum of 105 millimeters. And I shot for 10 seconds at f/22 ISO 100. And I got this. Light trails. Light trails. Now, I was honestly, it would have been better if it was 30 seconds because he was moving around even more than that. All I got was a 10-second exposure because in that particular area there were lots of street lights and I didn't have my neutral density filter on. But even with that, you can see how surreal it is. You don't see the truck. All you see is the light trails. I've got a tutorial on how to shoot light trails if you're not sure how to do that. And that banner should be going up right about now as well. It's a lot of fun shooting light trails. You can see the surreal effect that you get with that. Also, be on the lookout here for, again, reflections. Again, light trails. This was one truck going across the street, and he has various levels of lights. Those are the light trails. 24 millimeters, 30 seconds for this one at f/22 ISO 100. Of course, f/22, again, the star effect everywhere. You have him moving across here with the light trails, which is always a kind of neat effect. And you also have some lens flare. Now, I could have gotten rid of this easily in post-production. I could have wiped them out, but you know something? I wanted them there because it just adds to the effect of how different this whole thing really is. So you have to be super aware, all right? Super aware of what's going on around you because there may be vehicles where you can capture light trails, so make sure you're in position to get them. And if you're not, you have to move quickly. So you have to be aware and you have to be ready to move very, very quickly. I hope those tips help you out with your night photography, especially if you're doing it around water. Until next time, I'm Ray Scott reminding you it's not what you see, it's how you see it. Take care.